My sister-in-law, 23 female, is my husband's 28 male half-sister. She was the product of their mother's infidelity. His father divorced their mother when he was 12 after he found out through a paternity test she wasn't his. My father-in-law refused to have anything to do with my sister-in-law, but continued to have a relationship with my husband. Because of this, my sister-in-law is very clingy to my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, which is why I'm posting this here before mentioning anything to him. My husband and I bought a house last year, which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometimes with her friend. We said it was fine, as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend, Chloe, have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. He is a lawyer and works long hours. With lockdown, my husband has started to work from home. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant and don't want to accidentally expose the baby to anything risky. My sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe quarantined for 2 weeks, would they be able to come over? My husband said it was fine. 2 weeks later, they turn up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they go straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ends up coming out after an hour, and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink, and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says, "Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic, and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she's ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to swim every single day. Except Chloe never gets in the water. Instead, she hangs around the house in her bikini. She was previously wearing a one-piece if it makes a difference, every single day. Whenever my husband comes out to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to calm my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said Chloe could call him for me. They shared a look, and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She's put her hands on his chest and arms, stands or sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this is because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her, and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now, and it looks weird next to my husband because he's well-built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I know pregnancy hormones can mess with a person's brain, so I'm wondering if I'm just looking for something that isn't there. My sister-in-law sent me a text yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week, and I really want to say no, but I know she'll whine to my husband if I do. I ideally want to have a conversation with him before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being delusional? Too long. Didn't read. Sister-in-law and her friend are constantly asking to come over to use our pool, but her friend never swims. Instead, she waits around to start talking with my husband. She seems very flirtatious whenever she talks to him, but I'm not sure if it's just pregnancy hormones getting to me. Well, I read and reread all of the comments on the original post to try and figure out how I was going to bring up the issue. Turns out I didn't have to. We were watching a movie and my phone lit up with another text from my sister-in-law telling me she was now going to be here at 1 p.m. the next day to swim with Chloe. My husband saw it and told me to tell her not to come. This is really weird behavior for my husband because he tends to do anything to accommodate my sister-in-law and very rarely refuses her anything. I asked him if something had happened, and he shrugged it off, and we kept watching the movie. A few minutes later, he paused the movie and said he wanted to ask me a question. He asked if I'd noticed Chloe never swam when she came to our house. I wish I could say I was calm and collected like the comments were advising, but I ended up laughing hysterically. I was honestly just so relieved he brought it up instead of me having to be the one to do it. I think my husband thought I was losing my mind. When I finally stopped laughing, he repeated the question and said he wanted a serious answer. I said, "Of course I've noticed," and he awkwardly replied, "So, you must have noticed the other thing too." To summarize the conversation that followed, my husband hadn't noticed Chloe was flirting with him the first few days because he was so busy with work. He wasn't really paying attention to anything else. He said when she started getting handsy is when he suddenly had the light bulb moment that she was into him. He says he didn't want to unnecessarily stress me out, so he never mentioned anything, but he was worried I'd noticed too and thought he was interested because he hadn't immediately shut it down. He realized we would eventually have to have this talk, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up. Oh, the irony. He did privately speak to Chloe and told her he was happily married and wasn't interested in starting anything with anyone else. Apparently, she never took him seriously because she kept doing it. In the end, he called his sister on Sunday to tell her either she got her to stop or Chloe couldn't come over anymore. His sister ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me / the baby / our relationship. She insisted I was somehow behind his request and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure because I looked like a beach whale and Chloe was younger and hotter. He was pretty pissed at this and said if she said something like that about me again, he would stop speaking to her. She claimed I had baby trapped him, and when my husband pointed out we were already married so I didn't need to trap him, and that he was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept insisting I had manipulated him into feeling that way. She claimed he was unhappy in our relationship and he always looked tired because I was forcing him to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle. Whilst I sat on my ass all day, he pointed out he chose to be a lawyer knowing he would have to work long hours, and I had only recently left my job, so her accusations were baseless. She said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my husband finally snap was when she said the baby, was already ruining everything, and it was just going to get worse when it was born, and he should have dragged me to the abortion clinic whilst he had the chance. He told her neither her nor Chloe were welcome in our home anymore until they apologized for how they'd been behaving and for the things my sister-in-law said. He said he wasn't sure he could ever forgive or forget what she'd said about our child, even if she did apologies, and he couldn't believe she would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, she started crying and said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, and she was just scared to lose him, and that she wasn't thinking clearly. He hung up on her. He showed me his phone, and she's been calling him and texting him since, begging him to reply. He asked if she'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but he kept insisting he knew she had said something, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him the things I mentioned in the original post and a few other things she had said. He asked me why I never mentioned anything when she first said it, and I mentioned how he got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about his sister, and he got defensive. I pointed out he was doing it again, and after some back and forth he admitted that maybe he was a little bit defensive when it came to her, but he promised to stop, and he wanted to make sure we could talk about anything, including his sister. He ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. He said it wasn't because he thought there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently he has been speaking to his dad a lot recently, and he mentioned one thing he regretted about his marriage with mother-in-law is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in their relationship were too big. In his current marriage they go, and it's helped him avoid the mistakes of his first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon. My husband thinks my sister-in-law will eventually turn up even if we tell her not to, but he promised he'd deal with her if she does. So, Reddit, I guess you were right. I really did just need to speak to him. Thanks for the advice and comments. I enjoyed reading them all. Story 2. My husband slapped my best friend for staring at my breasts. Me and my husband have been together for 5 years and married for 1 year. I just had a baby several months ago, and I'm breastfeeding her. Before my pregnancy, I was a B cup. But after having a baby, my breasts have increased to DD. My husband, of course, loves the increase in my chest size and has lately been expressing sudden bouts of jealousy if anyone showed a little too much attention to me. The weekend before, both of our families and friends gathered together for a family celebration. Everyone congratulated us on the baby and oohed and awed, all of that usual stuff. Somewhere halfway through dinner, we were all peacefully eating and conversing. My best friend, we'll call her Amy, was staring a long time at my breasts, and I said, "You look like you want a taste of my Norks," and we both laughed. But without warning, my husband slapped my best friend on the face and said, "Her breasts are only for me to look at." Amy was stunned, and she immediately left the table while I looked at my husband in shock and asked what the fuck was he thinking. He said, "Sorry, I'm a bit territorial." Now, he knows the way Amy and I joke around, and he's never acted this jealous before. And over what? Her gazing at my breasts that long? Why wouldn't she or anyone I know for that matter? They're double D's now, for Christ's sake. His parents saw everything, everyone did, and they said that he has every right to defend his territory. I'm sorry, are we animals? I went after Amy, who was crying and already had an angry red mark on the side of her face. I calmed her down and she told me, "We were just joking around. What if he hits you someday?" I don't see my husband capable of doing that, but I am worried about his jealous that appeared during and after my pregnancy. Is this normal for men to act territorial during this period? And even though that doesn't excuse him from hitting a woman who is my best friend. Edit. The red mark has by now turned into a horrendous bruise, and I'm now freaking out because my husband has never shown this amount of jealousy before, not even close. And the more time passes, the more I think that she might be right, and if he can't control his impulses, then what guarantee is there that he won't do the same to me? Edit 2. I'm far from okay with it, and I've been cold towards him and keeping my distance since that day. Every time I see her and the bruise on her mark, I feel rage inside of me, and I cried this morning because I can see that my best friend is in pain. And she's still not going to press charges because I'm her friend and he's my husband, and all she cares about is me. I'm terrified at the thought of being a single mother, and I don't know if I can handle motherhood on my own. But Amy said that she will support me and help me. When he hit her, I was in shock, but I had a fleeting thought of stabbing him with a knife that was laying in the middle of the table. But I also had the fleeting thought I can't go to jail because I'm a mother. I love my best friend. When we were in college, a guy roofied her drink, and I made him instantly regret it, so I do care for my best friend deeply. Update. I recently made a post about this. To briefly recap it, we were at a family celebration, and my best friend, Amy, fake name, was staring at my breasts for a long time, and I jokingly said, "You look like you want a taste of my Norks." We both laughed, but my husband slapped her without warning and said her breasts are only for me to look at. She left the room, and when I asked my husband what the fuck was he thinking, he said, "Sorry, I'm a bit territorial." His parents saw everything and said that he had a right to defend his territory. When I followed Amy and found her crying, she asked me, "What if he does that to you someday?" She had an angry red mark on her face from where he had slapped her. I had a baby several months ago, and I'm currently breastfeeding, so my former B cups increased to DD. More than a few people have been giving me attention because of them, and my husband has been having sudden bouts of jealousy lately. Amy and I have been joking about my increased breasts. So, to get to the update, first Amy's red mark turned into a horrendous bruise, and her side of the face was a little swollen for a few days, but has returned to its normal size. I've been massaging her injury and rubbing it with arnica oil, but she's still taking ibuprofen. Seeing her in pain has been painful for me, and I've cried a few times while taking care of her wound. And all she cared about is me getting away from my husband. The next day, after I had posted my first post, my husband had come to me and apologized for acting territorial and striking Amy. He realizes that he should have just played along because he knows that our friendship would never cross the platonic friend line, and he'll go to therapy to fix his jealousy periods. I accepted his apology because he's the father of my child. But when we had sex the next few days, I felt nothing. Zero connection. I told him to stop on the third day when he was halfway, and he did stop and ask me what was wrong. I told him I was not feeling so good, and he just went to sleep. I kept replaying that slap over and over again this past week, and the more time passes, the more I realize that even though he might be a good husband and father, slapping a woman just because she looked at my breasts for too long in a joking way is something I can't forgive him for. I can't continue to live with a man who would do that. I don't even feel love for him anymore, just dead feelings. My baby and I are staying at my parents' place now, and I told my parents everything that has happened, and my father swore that if he was at that table when it happened, he would have beat my husband into a bloody pulp. Also, I want to add that my parents weren't at the family celebration, but my other family members were, including my younger sister. They were all in shock, and nobody said or did anything. My father is currently getting a lawyer for me, and the entire process terrifies me. My husband has contacted me already and asked why would I do this when he already apologized and said he was going to go therapy. And isn't that supposed to be enough reason for me to stay? He called me unloyal, double-crossing, and an unworthy cunt. He also said that there were a million times he could have cheated on me when I was pregnant and nursing. But he never did, and he should get credit for that because that's what other men would have done. His parents told me that I'm a selfish whore who can't stay true to her husband and has chosen some gay bitch over her loving and loyal husband. All of that made my blood boil, and I want to push past my fears of being a single mom and just divorce him. Amy is still more than happy to help me with the baby, and even suggested for me to move in with her so she can be there to help anytime, just as long as I get away from that POS. Edit. Amy hasn't filed a police report nor pressed charges yet, but it's completely up to her if she wants to do it or not because she said that since she was the one who was assaulted, it's her decision.